Okay, there we fucking go. I'm. Fuck. Alright, there we go. I'm mainly live streaming because I have nothing better to do with my time and I've been drinking. So I kind of need just somebody to kind of conversate with. Either way, I'm watching Death Machine from 1994 right now, which is a movie that's been on my watch list ever since I read about it in the book Fangoria's 101 horror films you've never best horror films you've never seen. And it's a movie I've been meaning to watch for a very long time, and I'm watching it now. This movie is not very entertaining. To be fair, I put it on mainly because I was like, man, I'm kind of tipsy. I want to watch something that's stupid. Let's watch Death Machine. I'm sure that that's stupid. But this movie seems to be trying to be serious. Which is funny because this is like a Japanese-American co-production cyberpunk horror film. If I wanted cyberpunk horror, I'd watch fucking Tetsuo the Iron Man. Ugh. I know nobody's watching right now, but, you know, very similar to my stream I did, like, I guess it would be in 2018. We'll wait to mid-2018. I guess I'm just going to go ahead and say a year ago. Where I watched Salo while getting absolutely shit-faced. You know what? Maybe I should watch something that's disturbing. Nah, fuck it. I'm just gonna see if this gets any more interesting. And if anybody wants to ask questions, they can in the chat. Let me turn on the TV just a little bit. Ow. Yes. Whew. Somebody's watching. I wonder who's watching. What is the worst movie of all time? That is a very good question because I actually recently just got done watching Manos: The Hands of Fate with my boyfriend. And he's not too well read on cult horror or anything like that. And he hated the movie. I asked him to give a rating out of 10, and he said -8 out of 10. Personally, I really like Manos, but either way, worst movie ever made, I'd probably have to say goes to Slaughtered Vomit Dolls, directed by Lucifer Valentine. It's a pseudo-art... I mean, I guess it's not pseudo-art. It's an art film, attempt at an art film, that's basically just the director's home movies of him raping this girl, combined with some fake snuff elements and her home movies from when she was a kid. It's not only one of the most just disgusting and horrific movies I've ever seen, it's also really just not pleasant at all. You know, I'd probably have to say Slaughtered Vomit Dolls is up there. Terratoons 3 is definitely up there as well. I like the first two Terratoons movies. They are also really fucking bad, but they at least had practical effects for the gore, which is something I could admire. In the third movie, they go full CG for the gore, and it's so bad. And part of what makes the Terratoons movies so entertaining as bad movies is the fact that the visual effects for the film are so fucking bad. But they're bad in kind of an entertaining way. In the third one, they don't use like CG or Photoshop to make the mouths of the masks that the characters are wearing for the villains move up and down. They just kind of don't worry about that at all, and that's part of why it's awful. Also, it's like the last film appearance of Herschel Gordon Lewis, the godfather of gore. So it's also kind of it's kind of like pissing on Herschel's grave. And I love Herschel. He's one of my favorite directors, but you know, he was also a fan of the first two movies, but he wanted to be in the third one, and he was in the third one. So, you know, I guess that's fine. Turn the TV down a bit more. I'm answering questions if anyone wants to ask them. I'm more than willing to answer. Ugh. Ugh. Jesus, this is fucking... Okay, yeah, we're gonna go with that for no, wait, no, cancel. God damn it. How do I feel about Just Franco? Just Franco is an interesting director, most definitely. I think he is iconic in his own right as a kind of schlocky horror director. I don't necessarily think he's good. I would actually say that he's a pretty bad director. However, he does have some good titles. I do think his lesbian vampire film, I think it's Vampiros Lesbos, is a pretty interesting kind of pseudo art film. His slasher film, Bloody Moon, is really entertaining. His film, I can't remember what the one film was that I've seen from him is titled. Let me see what it was here. No, not that. The Erotic Rites of Frankenstein from 1973 is a film from him that I do quite like, despite it being not necessarily that good of a movie. Just Franco's an interesting director, most definitely. I've seen Female Vampire from him, which is not a good movie, but it's kind of an interesting film he did, starring his wife. I wish I could name her off the top of my head, but I'm going to have to look up her name. Vampire. Lena Romay. That was her fucking name. Thank you. Yeah, that was her name. And I've seen Female Vampire. Female Vampire isn't very good, but there are some moments in it that were kind of interesting. I'm not the biggest fan of Just Franco, but he's definitely an iconic director in his own right, and I would say that he deserves the cult following he has achieved over the years. Let me just look through his filmography. I'm sure I've seen more than just handful of movies from him. He directed over 206. He directed 206 movies, so he has to have done something that's interesting. Out of what I have seen from him, let me see. The Erotic Rites of Frankenstein, obviously. Female Vampire is kind of alright. Oh yeah, I have seen The Saddest of Notre Dame, which is kind of interesting. His Jack the Ripper film with Klaus Kinski is also pretty good. I bought that one randomly, and I actually really liked his Jack the Ripper film with Klaus Kinski from '76, I believe. Let me make sure of that. Uh, he also directed Wanda the Wicked Warden, which is okay. It's the one of the unofficial Alsa films, and I love the Alsa films quite a bit. Oasis of the Zombies is fucking bad. I've seen that one from him. Oof. Yeah, I'm like a cartoon character. When I get drunk, I fucking hiccup. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that too many movies from him. Um, yeah, but still, I've seen his Jack the Ripper film. I like Just Franco. He's an interesting director, most definitely, but he isn't a director I regularly watch or trust when I find a movie by him. Very similar to the French director Jean Rollin, who directed Zombie Lake, which was originally going to be directed by Franco. That film is fucking god awful. And Jean Roland also directed The Iron Rose, which is a very great psychological horror film from the 70s. Come on, keep feeding me questions. I will answer most of them. Ugh. Oh God. I don't have much to say, personally, about anything. I just kind of wanted to do this because... What about the movie Cello? I actually did a live stream where I watched it the last time I watched the film. I did a live stream while watching the film while drinking. And I actually really like Salo. It's actually legitimately a really good movie. It's not a perfect movie, but I think it has some interesting elements to it. And, I don't like to get political on my channel, so I'm not going to get political. Especially after I've been drinking, because God knows it's going to be incoherent. But what it's trying to say as a film is very important. A movie that I will never watch again. What messed up movie will you never watch again? I want to say probably Goodbye, Uncle Tom. That was a movie I saw when I got out of high school, I think. And for those of you who don't know, Goodbye, Uncle Tom is a movie made by the people who made Mondo Cane and Africa Adito. And they made Goodbye, Uncle Tom to prove that they weren't racist, because Africa Adito was called a racist film. And Goodbye, Uncle Tom is basically like these... The setup for the film is these filmmakers go back in time to document slavery in America as it happens. And it is one of the most disturbing movies I've ever seen. It's not necessarily like this gore fest. There's quite a bit of sexual violence in it, which is very uncomfortable. It's not like the goriest movie ever or anything, but it's a very emotionally distressing film. I would also have to say, Come and See, the Russian film from the 80s, is another one that I would say is a film that I would never watch ever again, because it is so disturbing. I personally, though I won't lie, I do plan on rewatching that film eventually, because I watched it when I was in high school and I thought it was really disturbing then. And now I kind of want to rewatch it, but I want to make time for it because I get a feeling that rewatching Come and See is gonna really ruin my fucking day. What was the movie you were watching in your that solidified in your mind your love for bad cinema? To be honest, even though I don't consider it a bad movie, the first Evil Dead movie. Um, I remember watching The Toxic Avenger in middle school, and it really like got into under my skin. Like it was really legitimately very disgusting and disturbing of a movie. And when I saw Evil Dead not too long after the fact, uh, it really changed my perspective on cinema. Um, I would probably have to say definitely Evil Dead. It's one that um, it's a film that I really love, and I don't consider the first Evil Dead film to be a bad movie, necessarily. Uh, its production was a bit shaky, but it wasn't necessarily a good movie. But I would probably have to say the first Evil Dead movie. I remember watching that film when I was in middle school, and it legitimately disturbed me. And I didn't even think at the time that it was a bad movie. But that kind of started me down the path of cult cinema and led me to discover other movies. Is there a film you want to see, but it is hard to get a hold of? Uh, yes. There are quite a few of those kinds of movies. The biggest one is probably The Day the Clown Cried, which is a film that that comedic actor Jerry Lewis made in the 70s, and the reason it's hard to get a hold of is because the film was never released. Apparently, 10 years after his death, they're going to release it, which Jerry Lewis died, I think, last year. So in 10 years, we'll be able to see this movie. But The Day the Clown Cried is basically kind of a dark comedy having to do with a clown who is captured during the Holocaust in order to entertain children in concentration camps and also keep them, in high spirits as they are going to the gas chamber to their deaths. Um, Another movie I would have to say that is hard to get a hold of, and I really want to see is probably. Oof. I actually can't think of the name. Probably Shogun Sadism. It's a 70s Japanese horror film. Um, I recently actually ended up I recently actually ended up getting my hands on a copy. It's on my hard drive, on the hard drive of my computer, so I will watch it. But it is a film that I've been searching for the longest time, and it is like It is just a hard film to. It is just kind of hard to get a hold of. I think, I've been going around kind of, pirating, torrenting sites for many years, and it's been hard to find Shogun's Sadism, aka The Joy of Torture 2 Split Oxen Torture. I recently found it, and it's on my hard drive. I will watch it eventually, as well as the first Joy of Torture film, which is from the 60s, but as of now, that's one I can really think of that I've been searching for years. Um, One of the ones that to answer like both of these questions about like loving bad cinema and hard to get a hold of movies is Necromantic. I remember I was in high school and I had been searching and searching and searching and searching for a copy of Necromantic for many, many years. Maybe not many years, probably about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, but I've been searching for Necromantic, the first Necromantic film, for a while. And then I ended up finding it on YouTube, of all places. Um, and, that is another film that has solidified my love for cult cinema. I love Necromantic. It is one of my favorite movies of all time, honestly. Um, it's a weird art house kind of romance drama having to do with a man being left by his wife for a corpse, and then him spiraling down into insanity. Okay, has there ever been a movie that you were watching that has legitimately made you want to claw your own eyes out? Probably Terror Toons 3. Another one would probably be Nosferatu versus Father Pipecock and Sister Funk, which is a movie made by a guy named Tony Watt. And he made this movie where this black exploitation character who is a priest named Father Pipecock faces off against Count Orlok from Nosferatu, and it is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. The director sent me a screener many years ago when my channel was definitely smaller than it is now, but the director of the film sent me a screener, and I reviewed the film, and I reviewed it positively, or at least relatively positively, because I didn't want to scare away people who would potentially want to send screeners to my channel, or to me as a reviewer. Nowadays, I legitimately say it's one of the worst movies I've ever seen, and I've seen one other film from that director, which is Frankenpimp, which is legitimately fucking god-awful. And I would also say Frankenpimp is another one that made me want to claw my eyes out. It's a 3-hour-long movie that is apparently shot on film, but there are fucking shot-on-video films that look better than this film. As for the question of, was there a film you started watching but stopped stopped, and is there a film you started watching and had stopped due to disturbing content? As for that question, I would probably have to say the film Earthlings. Earthlings is a kind of vegan and or vegetarian kind of propaganda film. Don't get me wrong, the film is legitimately disturbing, and it is trying to push a message and is trying to say something about how we treat animals, not even just in the food industry, but that film I had to stop every 20 minutes or so to really just think and to digest what I had just seen. Earthlings is an interesting film, interesting documentary. It's narrated by Joaquin Phoenix, I'm pretty sure. Um, and the film is basically about this. It's basically a film about this, how we treat animals. The film starts with a definition of what the term earthling means, which is something who inhabits the earth. Basically signifying that the term earthling refers to all living life on earth, all living creatures on earth. And you have this film that shows not just, the food side of things of pigs and chickens and um, cows being slaughtered for food, but you also have a segment in the film which really, really upset me when I first saw it, of ooh, excuse me, a segment very early on of a country. I can't remember what country, but there was a very big problem there of feral, stray dogs, like, breeding and causing a very big problem of there just being random fucking dogs in the street, to the point that the government issued hunting licenses for dogs, for hunting dogs. And there is a scene where a guy shoots a dog, footage from said country, where a guy shoots a dog, and throws it into the back of a dump truck that is there to collect the corpses of dogs. And that really, really disturbed me, especially as somebody who has a dog and who loves him very much, loves the dog very much. I was really sickened by that film. And to be fair, I've found more disturbing movies since, in my personal opinion. But that's one of the big ones that really, really fucked with me. And I couldn't watch that. Most definitely. It is not a film I would recommend to anybody at all. I own a bootleg copy of it mainly because I kind of want to own a lot of disturbing cinema in my collection. And that's one of the films in my collection I would never watch again. There are other films in my collection I would say I wouldn't want to never watch again. But those films are more because they're really god-awful and not necessarily because the content is absolutely abhorrent. Shit. Any other questions? What do I think about studios rebooting horror classics? To be honest, I don't mind it, especially if the films are a bit older. Like the film that's coming out, I think later this month, the remake of The Invisible Man from the director of Upgrade. I think that film will be interesting. And I do want to see that film, legitimately. Especially because it's an R-rated horror film. We don't get a lot of those too often. But still, it's, with people remaking horror films, especially films from the 80s, like I've seen, like the recent remake, for example, of Black Christmas, I was interested in and I wanted to give a shot. Most definitely. Until it was announced that it would be PG-13. Then I was very apprehensive about it, and I still haven't seen it. I think I'll give it a shot once it's on home media. But as of now, I don't want to give that film a shot. You know, when it comes to the reboots and remakes and kind of readaptations of classics, it's um, it's hard for me to think of movies that are, you know, worthwhile in that respect. I know that they've recently announced that they're going to remake um, John Carpenter's adaptation of The Thing, but it's going to be, you know, but that was mainly a clickbait article. They're mainly going to adapt the extended version of the original novel, Who Goes There, which the extended version of it, of this short story, Who Goes There, the extended version, which is a novel length version of the film, is what they're going to adapt. So I'm interested in seeing that film. Have you ever seen a movie? Have you ever seen the movie Look Who's Talking To? And describe if you could, how easily you could turn that film into a horror movie. I've seen Look Who's Talking To. However, I saw that movie when I was very, very young. I'm pretty sure I remember there being a segment of the film, or maybe it was the first film in the series, of Look Who's Talking, who, where there was a segment involving like a spooky, scary teddy bear, which was kind of interesting. John H. Yo, what up? Well, he didn't say yo, but what up? Uh, my blood pressure is definitely up. Um, there's a lot of things that are up. For those of you who don't know, who might not follow me on Twitter, um, um, how, man, you've been sauced. Glad to be here. Yep, definitely. For those of you who don't follow me on Twitter, don't know, my uncle actually recently died due to an overdose. He was one of the 10 overdoses on opioids since he's one of the 10 overdoses on opioids uh, over the past weekend, you know, in Columbus, Ohio at least. So it's been kind of a rough week for me. I haven't made it public on my channel, mainly because I don't want to depress people with the details. But on my Twitter account, I have made it public, and I have made it something that, you know, I want to make a bit more, you know, public. My uncle wasn't the best person around, you know. He definitely made his mistakes, and he wasn't the best person to me during my life. But I remember my uncle. Sorry for your loss. Thank you. I do appreciate that legitimately. Um, my uncle was one of the people who got me into cult cinema when I was very young. We used to watch the Ninja Turtles movies, the live action Ninja Turtles movies together. I might start to cry here, so, you know, give me a minute. So, cheers. I'm sorry for your loss. Some parts in Ohio are bad. I had a friend that OD'd in Toledo. I'm sorry to hear about that, man. But, you know, my uncle was one. I remember watching the Ninja Turtles live action movies with him when I was younger. Those were some of his favorite movies of all time. He used to always quote the part, I think in like the second movie, probably the first, I don't remember exactly, where Splinter is talking about his master encountering his enemy, Oroku Saki, you know, and he always used to say, Oroku Saki, I know who you are, for we met many years ago in the home of my master, Hamato Yoshi. You know, he used to quote that all the time, and I remember watching, you know, all kinds of movies with him. One of the ones he really introduced me to was a film called Leprechaun, which, you know, I've always loved the Leprechaun movies. There's actually a picture of him and his friend, both of them dressed up as the Leprechaun for Halloween in the 90s. And You know, it's a really great picture. Leprechaun in the Hood. I actually recently rewatched Leprechaun Back to the Hood, and it was very, 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 very fun on New Year's Eve. But one of the last things, before I, kind of close the subject about my uncle, one of the last things I did with my uncle was watch the Joaquin Phoenix Joker film from last year. That's the last thing I ever did with him, was watch that film with him. And as a result, that film has kind of been ruined for me because now I will always think about him um, when it comes to that film. But I'm gonna try and I'm gonna try and kind of get off of this subject because I really don't want to talk about it too much. Um, is there an actor I would like to see do a horror film? Not necessarily. Maybe Joaquin Phoenix is a good one. Um, maybe Joaquin Phoenix is a good one. He was very good in Joker, and he was also he's been very good in a lot of different movies. Or director I'd like to see do a horror film. Um, you know, I don't have too many. Maybe the Safdie brothers. The Safdie brothers, they did Good Time, which I haven't seen yet, but I've heard is very good, and Uncut Gems, which stars Adam Sandler. And I saw that film recently, and Uncut Gems is really good. I'd like to see them do a horror film. A director who I would, you know, another just kind of branch off a little bit. A director I would love to see do more. I would have loved to have seen do more horror films. Keep in mind, because this director has been dead for 20 years. Um, I would like to see I would have liked to have seen Stanley Kubrick do more horror films. Most definitely, because The Shining is really great and it's one of his best films. I really like Stanley Kubrick's films, but The Shining is one that I really look forward to. It is one that I really like. I haven't seen Doctor Sleep just yet, but I have the director's cut on my hard drive, and I do plan on watching it here soon. The new Saw film looks promising, actually. I'm, I'm interested in the new Saw film, most definitely. I've always really liked the Saw movies quite a bit. Um, the new Saw movie, like, honestly, all the Saw movies, even up to part 7 and part 8, I've always really liked, I appreciate you guys giving me all these questions, and everything. I really do. But, up to even, like, Jigsaw, I've always really liked the Saw movies, even if they got kind of bad. I remember watching a bootleg of, like, the 6th Saw movie with my aunt, and she was losing her shit over how violent it was, and I was just like, oh, fuck yeah. Um, Uncut Gems, I love, which, Uncut Gems was very, very good. I really liked that film. Um, let me just try and make sure I'm not missing too many questions. Is there an Ultimate Fantasy Horror Series match? For me, mine is Freddy, Pinhead, Chucky, and Satan versus Jason. Michael Myers and Leatherface versus Bam Bam Bigelow. Michael Myers versus Michael Myers, Leatherface, and Bam Bam Bigelow. That's honestly not a bad matchup. Um, I really like. Jesus. I really like, the versus horror films. Even Freddy vs. Jason, which I personally don't like too much, is a film that I do like quite a bit. I would love to see a crossover horror film between. I was just talking to one of my friends about this recently. What is a film? what was one of them that I was talking about I was talking to my friends about recently. A friend of mine is in China, actually. He's living in China currently, and I talk to him every day. And I remember asking him a very similar question, and he said, I think he said, like, Hellraiser versus Pumpkinhead would be, um, would be a really good film. I think he said something like that. I can't answer too well. Oh fuck! I'm fucking wasting alcohol because I'm drinking. Um. Okay. Any recommendation? Ash versus Trump. Actually no, wait. Ash versus Jason versus Freddy is one that I would really like to see because of the comic books they made based on them. There's also an Ash versus Reanimator comic book series that I only own the first issue of. I haven't read all of them, but I would love to see Frank West, not Frank West, or Herbert West with all of his zombie reanimated creations face off against Ash from Evil Dead. Um, recommendation for first Mondo films? I would recommend Mondo Kane. Mainly because Mondo Kane is an interesting film, but not a perfect film. It's also not really that super disturbing. Um, there are other films like Mondo Magic, for example, which I would argue is one of the most disturbing, like, original Mondo films out there. It's very uncomfortable and gross. But the first Mondo Kane, I think, is one that I would recommend to anybody wanting to get into Mondo films. I would definitely recommend it before, like, Faces of Death, for example. Which I know Faces of Death was mostly faked, but a lot of people consider that film to be part of the Mondo genre. And I personally, I own a copy of Faces of Death, so I personally do kind of like Faces of Death, but still. Who would win between Freddy, Pinhead, and Chucky and Satan versus Jason, Michael Myers, Leatherface, and Bam Bam Bigelow? I would probably have to say Freddy, Pinhead, Chucky, and Satan, mainly because you've got a dream demon who can only be killed when pulled into the real world, as well as a demon that is completely unkillable, and a killer doll, and the devil himself, versus an undead killer, which is Jason, an undead killer that's Michael, Leatherface, who is mainly just kind of a serial killer at this point. Like, if you want to counter in the fact that, like, if you really want to say, like, oh, okay, well, Jason survived part 1, part 2, and even part 3 where he got blown up, and even part 4, which he does survive. If you want to count all of that into it, then maybe I would say it is something that, God, what am I saying? Let me just scroll back up a little bit. Yeah, okay. And Bam Bam Bigelow, I'll be honest, I don't know much about old school wrestling. I do know about Macho Man and Roddy Piper and fucking Hulk Hogan. I do know those guys, most definitely. But that's because their interview segments before fighting is a bit of a meme. It's a bit of a joke. It's kind of hilarious and how over the top it is, and I do respect that. Mondo Magic is the first one I plan to pick up. Thanks, man. I tried to buy Faces of Death collection on Amazon, but I have an annoying habit of naming the packages. Customs wouldn't let me have it. Mondo Magic is definitely one I would recommend picking up, mainly because I think it's going to go out of print from Massacre Video here soon. Massacre Video being a film distribution company, I have quite a bit of love and respect for, despite them not being the best out there. You know, like Arrow Video, or Arrow Video is obviously a bit more solid and I guess consistent as a company. Um, but Massacre Video has never led me astray, personally. I know there are people who would say that Massacre Video has led them astray, but I personally have never been led astray by them. Um, when I went to my first Cinema Wasteland, and I went to the booth and I meant to buy a couple of films from them, the guy at the booth, who was Lewis, one of the owners of Massacre Video, he gave me the films for free. He gave me the copies of the movies I wanted for free. And I remember saying to him, dude, I would hug you, but there's a table in the way. And he said, oh, come on, man, bring it in. And I hugged him. And I remember that's one of the big moments for me, when it comes to, like, films. When it comes to, like, distributors, I always really liked Massacre Video. Mainly because they gave me free movies when I went to my first ever fucking Massacre Video, not Massacre, but Cinema Wasteland convention. And that just might be like a chance thing. Like if I had gone to my second one and they recognized me, they probably would have given me free movies either way. But still, I also really like Massacre Video. They're a great company, and I would recommend buying any release from them. Before I answer the next question, just give me 1 second here. I gotta go to the bathroom. Okay. Let me. Okay, to answer a question that I skipped over, Art the Clown from Terrifier versus Frank Castle, who is the Punisher. I'd probably have to say Frank Castle, mainly because he's had experience when it comes to facing mob assassins, mob kind of contract killers. So, I think he would have an easier, quicker job taking out somebody that his, somebody like Art the Clown, who is just a mass kind of spree killer. What is your favorite movie that you would also categorized as a romantic comedy in some circles? Maybe Bad Biology from Frank Henenlotter and R.A. the Rugged Man. That's one that I would definitely say is considered a bit of a comedy. I can't say too many personally. Maybe, and this is a very big maybe, films like The Shape of Water, which isn't really a comedy as much as it's just kind of a fantasy romance film. I would consider that one as kind of a romantic kind of horror film. Maybe, I don't know who I would. I don't know what I would consider a romantic. I'm gonna have to go ahead and just, you know, somewhat not in the question. I would have to recommend the film, which I will grab the Blu-ray of it off my shelf right now. Shaun of the Dead is a romantic horror. Yeah, yeah, I would definitely consider Shaun of the Dead a romantic horror comedy. It's not one I think about too often when asked about the kind of genre of romance horror, but it's definitely one I would consider to be kind of part of the genre. But one film that I will never, I will always recommend when people ask me, what's your favorite romantic comedy, is Love Exposure from Shion Sono. Shion Sono being a Japanese director who is mostly known for his kind of interesting cult films, but he directed Suicide Club, which is a really great Japanese kind of horror dark comedy drama. He also directed Cold Fish, which is a really disturbing horror film from 2010, as well as a decent number of comedies and dramas and interesting movies like Tokyo Tribe, which is a rap battle musical film that he did based on a manga. Um, but Love Exposure is probably his masterpiece. This film right here. I love this movie. This movie runs for 4 fucking hours. And it's shot on digital video. And it is one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's absolutely fucking wild. Have I seen Spider Baby? I have. I love Spider Baby. I really enjoy a decent number of Jack Hill's films. I really like Coffee. And I think... Let me just look up Jack Hill's filmography here to make sure. I'm not, naming films that he didn't direct. Because he did do Spider Baby, and Spider Baby is a really great 60s horror comedy featuring Sid Haig from, who's probably most well known for being Captain Spaulding in The Devil's Rejects, who passed away last year, unfortunately. He was in that film, and he was really great in it. Let me make sure that he... Oh yeah, he also directed Bloodbath, which Bloodbath is a film I actually watched literally just last night, and I appreciated quite a bit. Spider Baby is one I really like from him. And he also directed Stiletto Sisters, which I haven't seen yet, but I know that is a fairly well-known exploitation film. Same with the Swinging Cheerleaders, and Foxy Brown. But I have seen Coffee, which is a film that actually predates Death Wish, the Charles Bronson film Death Wish, which is basically just about a woman, basically a movie about a woman who goes and kills drug dealers because I think her younger sister died of a drug overdose, and she goes on a spree killing drug dealers because of it. It's a really great exploitation film. I would definitely say most definitely that Spider Baby is probably his best film he's ever made. He was apparently an uncredited co-director on The Terror from '63, which is an interesting movie in and of itself, mainly because it was shot on leftover sets from Roger Corman's The Raven, and he was the director of that film, Roger Corman. And he shot it on leftover sets from The Raven and paid a guy $1,000 to write a script for a film set in a castle. And this is what they came out with, which is a weird, jumbled mishmash of different horror elements, all of which starring Boris Karloff, who was both the Mummy and Frankenstein's monster. But yeah, to answer the question, the original question at hand, have I seen Spider Baby? I have seen Spider Baby, and I love Spider Baby. It is a film that I've been meaning to pick up the Arrow Video Blu-ray of for many, many years. Very similar to Eaten Alive and a million other titles that Arrow Video has put out, but I've just been way too fucking lazy to do so. I'm assuming by Killing Spree you mean the Tim Ritter film, Killing Spree. And I have seen Killing Spree. If you're talking about the Tim Ritter film, and I really like Killing Spree. It's an interesting film. However, I okay, you are talking about the Tim Ritter film. Um, yeah. Killing Spree is a pretty entertaining movie. I really like that one from Tim Ritter. But if I had to, to personally, I'm more of a Truth or Dare kind of guy. I've seen Truth or Dare from Tim Ritter, and that is a film I enjoy a little bit more. Mainly because Truth or Dare, as a feature film, is a lot stupider. It's a lot more goofy and gory and fun. Maybe it isn't stupid. Maybe it isn't trying to go for a kind of goofy tone. But I kind of prefer that one mainly because it's just kind of fun. Let's see. I guess when it comes to Mondo, I'll need to watch some others before I brace myself for Goodbye Uncle Tom. I would recommend a lot of other movies before watching Goodbye Uncle Tom. If I had to give like top 5 movies to watch to prepare yourself for Goodbye Uncle Tom, it would probably have to be Africa Adito, Cannibal Holocaust, Come and See, and maybe Mondo Cane, and and maybe Faces of Death. Honestly, like there are very few movies I could recommend before I say you should watch Goodbye Uncle Tom. I recently got my friend who lives in China, and when I say recently, I mean like 2 years ago, to finally watch Goodbye Uncle Tom, and he said it was the most disturbing film he had ever seen. And this is a guy who has yet to see, films like Come and See all the way through, which I would say is definitely like second place behind Goodbye Uncle Tom. But still, um, Goodbye Uncle Tom is a film you really have to work up to. I remember watching that film, the uncut version of it, like the 3-hour version with the original ending, with my sister, no less. I watched like the last half of the film with my sister, who is older than me by like I want to say about 4 or 5 years, and she thought it was the most depressing thing she had ever seen. Keep in mind, my older sister's fairly average when it comes to seeing weird, disturbing movies. Before that, the most disturbing movie she had probably seen was, I want to say, maybe the first little bit of Cannibal Holocaust. Is there a film that you had multiple recommendations for that led to be a major disappointment? I could probably name one if I wasn't drinking so much. Give me 5 seconds. Give me a little bit here to think about this question of multiple recommendations and being disappointed by it. Probably I want to say Requiem for a Dream. by Darren Aronofsky. Not that that film isn't disturbing, because it is. But I had heard a lot of people say it was very disturbing, worse than Cannibal Holocaust, worse than this, worse than that. And don't get me wrong, Requiem for a Dream is a very unpleasant film, but I don't know if I would call it one of the most disturbing movies ever. Have you ever gotten to Unearthed Films? They are my favorite film distribution company. American Guinea Pig, Bouquet of Guts and Gore is my favorite. I do like Unearthed Films. They released some interesting stuff. They released Jimmy Screamer Claus' first film, Where the Dead Go to Die, which not everybody was a fan of. I personally quite liked that film. They haven't had another major hit with me recently, but I know that Unearthed Films is going to do a series of releases of plot digger films, which are basically films from the late Ryan Nicholson, who directed Gutterballs, which I love Gutterballs. I haven't watched it in a few years, but I'm sure it probably won't be as good on the next watch. But I really like Gutterballs. And I remember he died I want to say a month or two ago, and it was really, really sad because I remember I pre-ordered a copy of Gutterballs 2 on his website in like 2015 when I graduated high school. Here I am, 2020, still don't have it. Still don't have the film that I pre-ordered. I'm not saying this as like, oh, he's a scam artist, because I do know that Gutterballs 2 was released, at least in its Texas Frightmare form, which is where it was originally screened. I do understand that. However, I've been very excited for Gutterballs 2 for a long time. I still haven't received my copy that I pre-ordered in 2015. You know, it's kind of hard to sit here and say, hey, this is really, really great, and I really, I really want, I'm really excited for it, I'm really looking forward to it, when I've been promised this film since 2015 and I paid $25 for it. I'm kind of over it by now, honestly. $25 is just $25. That's like, 0.001% of my average medical bill being a diabetic. So I'm not really that mad about it costing that much. But still, I will probably pick up their Blu-ray of Gutterballs when it comes out. I know they did recently a Blu-ray of Famine, which Famine's okay, from what I remember. Do you think there's anything left out there that you have not seen that could potentially shock the holy hell out of you? I kind of doubt that there's anything that can really, really, really get under my skin and fuck with me anymore. However, I've said that before, and then a film comes out of nowhere and really does that to me. For instance, I remember saying many, many years ago, and there's never going to be a film that fucks with me as much as Earthlings, or as much as Come and See. And then, stuff like Goodbye Uncle Tom comes along, or stuff like In a Glass Cage comes along. In a Glass Cage is another one that I would say is like a really, really disturbing film. There are films that come out every year that surprise me in a way. And there are films that I find that do legitimately shock and unnerve and disturb me even to this day. I can't really name any off the top of my head, but there are definitely films that I find every couple of years that really, really fuck with me and leave me in a really fucked up state of mind. I'd probably say one of the most recent ones is Climax from Gaspar Noé, which is one of my favorite movies from last year. With Climax being a very like surprisingly disturbing little film. I was not expecting it to go the places that it did, nor did I expect it to be as horrific as it was, especially as a theatrical experience. I'm sure if I were to have seen, Cannibal Holocaust in theaters for the first time I ever saw it, it would probably be a really shocking, horrific experience that I would hold with me till the end of my days, for the rest of my life. Um, and maybe if I saw Climax in a situation of like, just watching it on my fucking TV after it hit, um, Amazon Prime, I'm sure that that Climax probably wouldn't have hit as hard. But that's one that I think I could that really fucked with me. I think there are still films out there that could disturb me, but you know, I couldn't, there's still films out there that I think could still disturb me, but they're far from few and in between. I don't think I'm gonna find them by watching films like Scrapbook or Home Movie, for example. What is the worst slasher film in your opinion? Probably Del Playa. This was a film I mentioned on my worst horror films of 2010s video. Del Playa is a slasher film based on a spree shooting committed by a person named Elliot Rodger. Now, Elliot Rodger is a pretty infamous human being, mainly because before he committed this spree shooting that he did in 2014, he had a YouTube channel where it was basically him on camera saying, why don't women like me? Why won't women sleep with me? I have all this money. I have these nice cars. It's basically Elliot Rodger had this manifesto of why women won't give him the proper attention he believes he deserves. And in 2017, Jesus, I just heard Chucky's voice from my TV. Then I remembered I'm watching fucking Death Wish, or not Death Wish, but Death Machine, which stars Brad Dourif. Either way, fucking this film Del Playa basically tries to make this this despicable, sexist, racist human being Elliot Rodger into a likable person. And it's one of the worst films I've ever seen in my entire life, and it's also a really pathetic attempt at a slasher film. Like a lot of slasher films are often called sexist, misogynistic, and uncomfortable, and horrific, but Del Playa is one that I would legitimately think is disgusting. What did I think about Midsommar? Midsommar was a film that when I first saw it when it came out, I saw it like a day after it came out. I wasn't impressed by it. I thought it was a very average film. It's basically, and I still stand by this statement, it is basically The Wicker Man, but with more gore added to it. However, upon watching it again and watching the director's cut, I do actually really like Midsommar. It's definitely an uncomfortable film, especially with the stuff that happens in the first act to the main character. And I do think it does a decent job of, like, having folk horror elements without showing its full hand. I personally like Midsommar. I wish they would release the director's cut on Blu-ray here in the US, but they have not, which really sucks. Have I ever heard of the channel Horrible Reviews? I have. I was a very big fan of that channel. I loved Horrible Reviews for many, many years. He was a source of inspiration for me as a reviewer for many years, and as somebody who likes bad movies for many years. I know his channel, somewhat recently got absolutely fucked over by terms of service, and that really sucks that Horrible Reviews got fucked over. like that, you know. I I mean, I'm still kind of disappointed that his channel was gone because there are so many videos from him that I think to myself, like, man, I want to rewatch that video. That video was good. Like his fairly recent, before his channel got fucking murked by Susan Wojcicki, um, his video he did on the Sleepaway Camp movies. Like, I thought that video was fucking amazing. And then his whole channel got fucking destroyed, and it really, really sucks. Imagine you're God, you're running a reboot of Nightmare on Elm Street in heaven, and you've got casting down to 3 people to play Freddy Krueger. Who are those 3 people? Um, Top 3 people I would want to play Freddy Krueger, other than um, Robert Englund, who is probably my first choice. I'd probably have to say Ryan Gosling. Or no, wait. Fuck Ryan Gosling. Nah. Fuck Ryan Gosling. Never mind. I'm taking that back. They gotta be in heaven, so they gotta be dead. Okay, dead people. You know what? Robin Williams. He was one of the first choices to play Freddy Krueger, actually, before Robert Englund. And I would really like to have seen his version of Krueger. Another one, maybe Lance Hendrickson. I would have liked to have seen his version of Freddy Krueger, because he was really great in Hobo with a Shotgun and Blade Runner, and I think he was also in Mom and Dad with Nick Cage and Selma Blair. Third person to play Freddy who is dead. Maybe Gunnar Hansen or Angus Schrim. Those 2 guys I think could maybe do an interesting job. Maybe not a good job, but an interesting job. What is my least favorite Herschel Gordon Lewis film? Out of everything I've seen from him, I'd probably have to say it's Black Love, which is his pornographic film. Don't you mean Rutger? Yeah, Rutger Hauer. Who the fuck did I say? I don't remember what I said, but yes, Rutger Hauer is who I meant. What's my least favorite Herschel Gordon Lewis film? You know, probably Black Love or Ecstasies of Woman. Those were his 2 like pornographic sexploitation films he did in the 70s. Don't get me wrong, you know, like I'm not ashamed of him for doing them, because he has one film called Laura and Abel, I believe. I can't remember what the fuck his one movie was called, but he had a porno western film that he did that was actually a pretty decent revenge film. You know, I'm not super disappointed in him, but Black Love is probably his least interesting film. You know, I really used to hate what was that one he did? Color Me Blood Red. I used to really, really hate that one. But I rewatched it somewhat recently, and I actually really liked Color Me Blood Red. Why do you think the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street did so bad? I think Jackie Earle Haley did a good job. I personally, to this day, think Jackie Earle Haley was pretty decent as Freddy Krueger. Don't get me wrong. I think the fact that they went for the... I think my problems with the film consist of the fact that they went for the completely child molester angle of it. You know, one of the reasons people always really liked Freddy was because, you know, he was just kind of enjoyable and entertaining, especially after the first movie. I mean, the first movie he was scary. After that, he was kind of funny. And I think one of the big reasons was they never explicitly said child molester. You know, and don't get me wrong, you know, like, I think, you know, you can make a child molester the villain and make him a good villain, but I don't think that Robert Englund as a child molester works too well. And it's kind of a problem I have with it because like I believe 100 times out of 100 times out of 101 times that a child molester should be fucking executed on the spot. Personally, that's my personal political belief, and that's the only political belief I will express on this channel is that child molesters should be fucking executed. However, I think if you want to make an interesting villain, you can't just go straight for child molestation. You have to go with the child murderer element that was the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and that's one of the big problems of the remake. Um, Other than that and some of the CG gore, I don't absolutely hate the remake, but I just kind of have to, like, say I hate it, mainly because I do think it's, like, a relatively watchable film. Like, it's not a film that I put on regularly, but if I want something to put on as background noise, it's definitely one that I think I could put on as background noise. Um, so I'm not necessarily 100% like ups. I don't think it's necessarily one of the worst films ever made, but it's definitely one of the worst films of the 2010s. Did you think The Begotten is a good movie? Did I think Begotten was a good movie? I personally really like Begotten. When I first saw it, around the same time I started doing reviews on my channel, um, I really despised Begotten. I thought it was just artsy, disgusting, not necessarily disgusting, but like artsy, incomprehensible bullshit. As somebody who's recently rewatched the film, I actually really like the movie. It's basically just this gloomy, disturbing visual trip. It's very depressing, and it's hard to describe why it's depressing, but it is. Um, I would say, if anything, it's a film to put on, and maybe put on like Mirror Reaper by Bell Witch, or some other kind of droning, depressing, gloomy kind of doom metal. Put that shit on in the background while you watch Begotten. It fits perfectly, and it makes the film a lot more uncomfortable and disturbing. What film should I start with? Well, once get into Jess Franco, I'd probably have to say I'd probably have to say Bloody Moon, because that's one of his better films, and it's definitely one I would recommend to everybody. However, if you want to get into his movies, as in like watch a lot of his filmography, I'd probably have to say The Erotic Rites of Frankenstein is a direction I'd want to point, because that displays some of his pornographic, erotic elements, which were, there in a lot of his movies, even his, more serious stuff. Um, you know, like, I'd probably have to say top three movies to start with if you want to get into Jess Franco is Erotic Rites of Frankenstein, Bloody Moon, and Vampiros Lesbos. Those are the three that I would probably have to say are the ones that are worth seeking out if you want to get into his work. Ugh. Ow. Have you ever got into Men Behind the Sun? I really like that one. Yeah, I actually saw Men Behind the Sun when I was in high school. I really like that film. Like, legitimately, I really like it. It's a film. I'm pretty sure it's a movie made in Hong Kong, but it's been praised by Chinese audiences as a film that really displays the disturbing brutality and reality of unit. Jesus. That really displays the reality and brutality of Unit 731, which is something that not a lot of people know about. I get that Men Behind the Sun was a really interesting watch, most definitely. I get that, Unit 731 and what they did is kind of overshadowed by what happened during the Holocaust. Don't get me wrong, Holocaust was fucking horrific, and you know, um, I can't say because because I wasn't personally there, but I've seen documentaries. I have done my research. The Holocaust was fucking horrible, but I do think people need to, take a moment to realize that the Chinese got fucked over a lot. Like around the same. I don't want to say around the same level, but definitely there was a lot of inhumanity when it came to the Japanese and their attitudes and their actions against the Chinese during World War II. Uh, there's a lot of that. And I think one of the best examples is Men Behind the Sun. That is a film that I would recommend to anybody who's never heard of Unit 731 and can handle the content of said film. There was also stuff like the rape of Nanking, which is an incident that is denied by Japan even to this day. There are people in Japan who do not believe the Japanese government was capable of such barbarism to this day, and it's not a pleasant film. Black Sun, The Rape of Nanking, or the Nanking Massacre is not a pleasant film at all, and it's really horrific. What was my take on the Suspiria remake? Controversial opinion. I think the original Suspiria, while being an interesting movie, is not that great of a movie. The remake is exactly what I wanted from a film with a plot like the plot of the original Suspiria. Despite the remake being 2.5 hours long, I actually went to see that film when it came out. And it stands as one of the most horrific films I've ever seen in the theater. Like it's legitimately really fucking uncomfortable and unpleasant, especially when I think back to when I first saw it and the problems I had when I first saw it, which were kind of resolved as I've rewatched the film multiple times. But what I think is kind of funny is the same theater that I saw Suspiria in is also the same theater that I saw Perfect Blue in, which I caught a screening of the dub of Perfect Blue, which the dubbed version of Perfect Blue is decent. It's not necessarily awful, but it's not as good as the subtitled version. But I saw Perfect Blue on the big screen at the same theater where I saw Suspiria on the big screen, and in the same theater where I saw Climax on the big screen. This one specific theater is also the theater where I saw my first Tarantino movie in theaters, which was The Hateful Eight. This theater is one that I have a bit of a history with, and I've always carried that kind of love for this specific theater, even if it is, it's not like a local art house theater, mind you. It is a local AMC theater that I'm talking about. But even then, I really like the Suspiria remake, and I think it does a great job of fleshing out the plot to be 2.5 hours long. I was not bored the entire time I watched the movie, and after watching it, I told my friend who was slightly interested in it, like only barely interested in it, you should have gone with me. And he proceeded to see it at his theater that he works at the next day, and he didn't like it as much, which makes sense because he hasn't seen the original, and he's not too big of a weird horror fan, but still. Do I like Mel Brooks films? Yes. I love Spaceballs. Spaceballs is one of my favorite movies. I wouldn't put it on like my top 100 movies ever made that I've ever seen, but I would definitely say that Mel Brooks is an interesting director and a very good comedy writer. I've also seen Robin Hood Men in Tights, which was also from Mel Brooks, which was also very, very good. I've seen Dracula Dead and Loving It, which is a film that I own on DVD. I love Dracula Dead and Loving It. That's one of my favorite Mel Brooks films. It's very, very entertaining, very goofy, very fun. Mel Brooks is a director and writer that I really, really respect and love. Um, despite him having a few misses every now and then. For example, I wasn't the biggest fan of Young Frankenstein. I do like Young Frankenstein, don't get me wrong. But it's not a movie I would say is one I really, really enjoy. I haven't seen Philosophy of a Knife yet. Is it worth seeking out? Philosophy of a Knife, if I remember correctly, let me just make sure. Let me make sure this is the movie that I'm thinking of. 2008, Philosophy of a Knife. 4 hours. Yeah, that's definitely the movie I'm thinking of. Philosophy of a Knife is a god-awful movie, in my opinion. It's not that interesting, nor is it that disturbing of a movie, mainly because it has a lot of really bad visual effects added on to it. And I cannot recommend Philosophy of a Knife at all. Let me, However, if you do personally want to seek the film out, I'm not gonna. Yeah, LOL, cool, I'll avoid it. What's the worst comedy film you've ever seen? Ooh, that's a hard question because I've seen a lot of bad comedies in my days. I'd probably have to say the movie 43. It's a sketch comedy film. Most of the comedy sketches consist of, hey, how edgy can we be? And don't get me wrong, I'm not somebody who absolutely despises edgy humor. I mean, I think that the third Human Centipede movie is a pretty entertaining little flick. However, I don't think edgy comedy is automatically the way to go about making a comedy. Inappropriate comedy is another one that I would say is like definitely one of the worst comedies I've ever seen. Maybe, and this is a very big maybe, The Worm Eaters is one that I would say is one of the worst comedies I've ever seen. But even then, The Worm Eaters is a film that I personally really like. Who would win in a fight? A one-legged Wesley Snipes or an armless Steven Seagal? Probably a one-legged Wesley Snipes, because he at least has his arms, And he was Blade, after all. He could at least hop around. Are there movies you wouldn't support simply because of awful behind-the-scenes stuff? Most definitely. One of the big films I would say is one of the worst movies ever made. Not necessarily 100% because of behind-the-scenes stuff, but there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that really, really makes it bad. Is Straw Dogs. Straw Dogs, Sam Peckinpah Straw Dogs from 1971, is a film that I did a analysis video on, comparing it to I Spit on Your Grave. And it is disgusting and horrific. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that's really uncomfortable. For instance, the director apparently forcing the main actress to do the rape scene in the film by threatening to, physically assault her. There's also Clown House from, I think, the mid-'80s, which is a film directed by Victor Salva, who is a director I will never support as long as I live. Basically, Victor Salva made this movie in the early 80s that starred a specific child actor. And this film is in this specific short film that he made is impossible to see for reasons I will get into later. But this same child actor starred in this director's other movie that Francis Ford Coppola produced because he saw this short film. As the director of fucking Apocalypse Now and The Godfather produced this film because he saw this specific short film from this director. And this film starred one of the actors from the child actor from this director's short film, and this film has never been released. Well, it's been released on DVD, but it's very hard to get your hands on a copy of. But this film has only really been released on like VHS and a handful of DVD copies, which are very hard to get your hands on. But this film was barely released because the lead child actor, or one of the lead child actors, was molested by the director who filmed himself raping the child, and it was fucking horrific. He filmed it and and it's a footage that exists, and as a result, the parents of the child actor refused to have the short film released to the public, which I'm honestly disappointed in, because the short film I actually do want to see, which I think the short film is called There's Something in the Basement. But the first feature film of this director is Clown House, which starred the same director, which is where the director molested the child actor and filmed it. And this director is still working today. Victor Salva, I believe, is his name. Let me... Yeah, Victor Salva is this director's name. And he did time in prison for molesting this child. However, I will never fucking support this director ever in my entire life. He directed all of the Jeepers Creepers movies, which already are not that good of movies in the first place. Something in the Basement, his short from 1986, has yet to be released to the public. And that's the only film from him that I actually want to see. But it hasn't been released due to the fact that due to the fact that he molested the child on set, one of the child actors on set on his film Clown House, which is god awful. Okay, I think that's enough of ranting about pedophilia. My friends love the Evil Dead remake, but I hated it. My argument is that there's no Ash, it's not an Evil Dead movie, but I loved Ash vs. Evil Dead TV show. I personally liked the Evil Dead remake. I like that they went with the no Ash angle, because let's be honest, if they tried to recast Ash, there would be a fucking riot. So I completely respect the fact that they went without Ash. I will admit that the Evil Dead remake is not perfect. I saw it when it came out, and I absolutely adored the film because it went, because it did not go with the CG gore. It went with practical effects and everything. I don't mind the Evil Dead remake at all. Yeah, Ash did cameo in the end of the remake, which I remember when I went to see the movie when it came out, the weekend it came out, like the Friday it came out, I went to see it. And I remember saying, I was in high school at the time, I remember saying to my father, who was in the theater with me, Dad, we cannot leave the theater yet, we gotta wait till the end of the credits, because apparently there is a trailer for Ash vs. Evil, Evil Dead 4. And there was just Ash saying groovy and looking at the screen and an ending, And that was completely worth it. That was completely worth the time I spent on the film. Um, I like the Ash vs. Evil Dead TV show quite a bit, but I wasn't somebody who absolutely hated it. Jeepers Creepers 3 was the most hated. Yeah, Jeepers Creepers 3, from what I heard, was the absolute worst of the series. Which is, interesting to me because I've always hated the series. Even before I realized the director was a pedophile, I hated the series. Now that I know he's a pedophile, I automatically give all the entries in the series a 1 out of 10. Like, it's bad. 1 second, I gotta let my dog in my room. Oh. Oh no. He don't like being on camera. He don't like being on camera. He's a little wiener dog. He thinks he's a tough guy, but really he's a little soft. He's a little softy. Rocky, shut up. If possible, give a short narrative of Space Alien. That dog is cool. The baby's so vicious. Yeah, Rocky, he's, Oh, shut up. I've had him for about 11 years. Ah! Your breath stinks, Rock. Next December will be 11 years that I've had this dog, and he is an old, old dog. Is the Naking Massacre worth watching? Most definitely. Rocky Dog Boa. That's actually why we named him Rocky, was because we were like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if there was a little wiener dog named after Rocky Balboa? See that, Rocky? People like you. Okay, I'll put you on the bed. And Rocky from Three Ninjas. I haven't watched Three Ninjas in a very long time. But, yeah. Let me just... Three Ninjas was dope. Yeah, I really like the one, even though it's considered like the worst movie ever made, with Hulk Hogan in it. I really like that one. Is there any films you would give a lower rating than 0? Probably Clown House. That's definitely one I would consider giving a rating lower than 0, mainly because it was basically made as an excuse to, exploit and sexually assault the child actors of the film. Another film I would consider giving a rating lower than 0 is, is probably... I don't know. I don't know what another film I would give lower than 0. I can't think of it, but if I remember, I will get back to that question. Did I like Beyond the Black Rainbow? Yes. I loved Beyond the Black Rainbow. It was really interesting and weird. and I really appreciate it, despite its weird aspects and definitely not for mainstream kind of attitude. I really like it, and I think it's better than the director's second film, Mandy. No, but I still like it. Let's see. Have I ever seen Suburban Commando? I have not. Um, I don't think I ever really plan to see it. If it's on, if it hits some random streaming service, I might. I might watch Suburban Commando. It's interesting. Um, it's a film that's kind of interested me because I've always really liked that film with Hulk Hogan. I think it was like Mr. Nanny or something like that. I've always really liked that film ever since I was a kid, and I'd be willing to give more Hulk Hogan films a shot personally because he's one of those wrestlers that's really iconic, and his interviews and kind of in between segments. Um, are really entertaining. Very similar to the Macho Man's interviews. Most famously the Cream of the Crop interview, which if you've seen that interview, you know what I'm talking about. Where Macho Man just keeps pulling coffee creamers out of his ass, and he's just bouncing them on his head and handing them to fucking Mean Gene Okerlund, I believe. Uh, have I ever reviewed Artois? I have not. I've been meaning to see Atrocious. However, been meaning to see that film for quite a while, because I've heard interesting things about it, and I've heard about the segment involving like the serial killer, like a snuff filmmaker's parents, and what he does to them, and I've always heard that is like really disturbing and interesting. You need to check out Suburban Commando. I'll have to then. Favorite Bruce Lee movie? It's hard to say personally. I would probably say either Return of the Dragon or Way of the Dragon. Um, those are like the two ones that I always remember. When it comes to, you know, Bruce Lee films. Uh, there are other ones that I know I've seen, but those are the two really big ones. I've seen a decent amount of Bruce exploitation films as well, like Bruce Lee Fights Back from the Grave, for example. I've seen that film, which I don't, it is a public domain film, but I've seen that one. Do I like any Paul Naschy films? I haven't seen too many Paul Naschy films. I know that Paul Naschy is kind of iconic among the, Spanish horror community. Um, he's most famous for, like, being the Wolf Man in some Spanish films. Let me see if I've ever seen him in any movies, because I want to make sure. Okay, let's see here. Paul Naschy. Um, I think I've seen one of his movies, and that's mainly because of the Paul Naschy like DVD set. But I haven't seen um too many of his movies. I know, like, I think it's like The Blue Eyes of the Broken Doll is one of his films, which is one of the Section 3 video nasties. That's one that's on my list. Uh, and I know, I think, what is it? Night of the Howling Beast is one that is on my list to see because it is one of the video nasties of the 70s, I believe. Which I'm kind of interested in. But I think I've seen his film that he was in from like 2005. That was on like the Werewolf of the Amazon set, I think, um, which wasn't too memorable. Uh, Let me see here. Rest in peace, Mean Gene. Rest in peace, Mean Gene. Mr. Nanny and both Hulko and Ramsey, aka Jefferson, from the Jeffersons. Yeah. Have I ever seen Kung Pao Enter the Fist? I actually have not seen Kung Pao. It's a film I've been meaning to check out for a very long time. Same with Kung Fu Hustle. Um, it's a film I've been meaning to check out for a very long time, but I've just been kind of lazy about checking out. I know that I'm pretty sure that film is like Kung Pao is written and directed by Steve Odekirk, who I'm sorry. I just looked at this piece of my fucking laundry hamper, and I saw the other side of it. I'm not going to show you guys mainly because it's awful. But I saw the other side of it, and there's something written on the other side that is kind of funny, or not necessarily funny, as much as it is awful. I know that there was a sequel to Kung Pao Enter the Fist that like even got a trailer released that was never released. I do like Steve Odekirk's stuff personally. You know, like he was behind O Entertainment, who produced the Jimmy Neutron cartoon, which I was always a big fan of when I was younger. Favorite David Lynch film? Probably Eraserhead. I have yet to see a film from Lynch that is as interesting and entertaining in terms of its surrealness as Eraserhead. You know, Eraserhead is just one that is like equal parts disturbing and creepy and scary, as well as being this really funny, absurdist comedy. I've always really liked Eraserhead. I've seen um, Mulholland Drive. I'm not the biggest fan of Mulholland Drive personally. So, I need to see more of Lynch's stuff before I really say, like, this is his best film. But out of everything I've heard about from him, I think definitely Eraserhead might be his best film. Are you very into the Troma films? I love Troma. I'm willing to give a lot of stuff that they put out a shot, mainly because that they are interesting and they like to kind of distribute weird, interesting stuff. One of my favorite Troma films, at least out of the Troma films not directed by Lloyd Kaufman, is Honky Holocaust, which is a film from 2014 that is basically like the setup for the film is that is that I don't want to say this because I don't want to be taken out of context, but basically, Charles Manson's predictions of a race war turned out to be true, and he and him and his followers, or at least his followers, he dies in their hidden desert bunker. His followers rise out of the bunker many years later, including Charles Manson's daughter. And they enter a new world that is, basically that is basically the modern world we live in, except black people are on top, and there are black police officers killing random white people, saying it's just another cracker dead in the streets. It's a very it's a very political film. Most definitely. I own it on Blu-ray. I respect its kind of political consciousness, despite it being a really low-budget, cheesy, gross film. And it was a film that I wanted to feature on my video. Um, it was a film I wanted to feature on my video of best horror films of the 2010s. But I kind of didn't want to talk about it. But now that I'm sitting here drunk, I'm willing to talk about it. I agree, Eraserhead is a masterpiece. Lost Highway next, possibly. I haven't seen Lost Highway next. I haven't. Fucking Christ. I haven't seen Lost Highway yet. It is a film that is on my. Okay, there we. Lost Highway is the next film on my list that I want to see, and you know, it's definitely one I really want to see. The Toxic Crusader cartoon is based off the Toxic Avenger films. Yeah, actually, funny enough, I mentioned this earlier in the stream. I actually just before starting the stream watched Manos: The Hands of Fate with my boyfriend, and he absolutely hated it. I also before this, a few months ago, watched The Toxic Avenger with my boyfriend, and he didn't seem to understand what the film was going for. I had to kind of explain what the film was going for to him. And when I told him, yeah, there's 3 sequels to this movie and a cartoon series, he didn't believe me. And then I showed him all of the Blu-rays of the film that I own, which is all 4 of them. And I also showed him a picture of a screen cap of, I should say, and the first episode of the Toxic Crusader show, which then he said to me in the middle of watching the movie, after I told him, yeah, there are 3 of these movies in a cartoon series for children based on it. He then said to me, Jesus fucking Christ, you weren't lying. Let me... Okay, let me see here. Have you listed to any impetigo? I do not know what that means. From the looks of it, it is a highly contagious skin infection that mainly affects infants and children. Usually appears in red sores on the face, child's nose and mouth, and on the hands and feet. The sores burst and develop honey-colored crust. I don't know what that question is about. I've only seen the Toxic Avenger once, but it was great. I saw the Toxic Avenger when I was in middle school, and it's one of the films along with Scarface, the Brian De Palma film, and Evil Dead, the Sam Raimi film. It's one of those like 3 films that really inspired me to seek out interesting, violent cult horror. From the looks of it, there was a message that was redacted. I love the Toxic Avenger movies. Melvin Junko, aka Toxie, has a thing for blind chicks, most definitely. That was something that my boyfriend actually pointed out about the film, was that Toxie was hot for blind chicks. Speaking of, have you seen Sorry to Bother You? I loved Sorry to Bother You. It's a very good film about class consciousness. However, I'm gonna have to stop the stream here. I will come back in a minute, but I'm gonna stop it here. I've got to do something here real quick. I'll be back.